Graviteam Tactics Mius Front is an RTS and turn-based strategy game which makes good use of realistic combat mechanics. The game itself allows a player to take control of regiment-sized forces, that's to say hundreds of soldiers and dozens of tanks, all of which are well modelled and function authentically to their real-world counterparts. The game is primarily set on the Eastern Front during the Second World War, but it does offer some interesting scenarios in the form of DLC, such as the Soviet-Chinese border skirmishes. Although that particular DLC is a bit sparse in terms of content, and I wish they'd worked a little bit more. Maybe should have included the Shenbao Island skirmish, which is a real battle that occurred in 1969 between the People's Republic of China and the USSR. The most intriguing DLC is the South African Border War DLCs in the form of Operation Modular and Day of the Oliphant. I especially enjoyed this because, well, I rather enjoy history, and for me this is one of the most interesting and in some ways more bizarre conflicts of the Cold War. I say bizarre because this conflict also included a substantial contingent of the Cuban armed forces, which included tanks, soldiers, and warplanes. When reading about the subject, I found it bizarre that such a small country, relatively far away, would send so much of itself to what was an obscure part of the world, and to a conflict which didn't actually involve them directly. Such is the power of ideology, I guess. If you're not familiar with this conflict, I'll provide a very brief rundown. Fighting originally started in 1975 when Portugal withdrew from Angola, following years of armed struggle against Portuguese colonial authorities and the Carnation Revolution, in which the Estado Novo government was overthrown, which put an end to a long and rather fruitless war. The result of the subsequent independence of Angola led to infighting between two of the larger resistance movements, MPLA and UNITA. You may have heard these names before if you've played Metal Gear Solid 5, in the Angolan portion of the game, it's actually set loosely during this war. By the 1980s, Angolan MPLA troops crossed the border into South Africa-administered Namibia, which forced the South Africans directly into the conflict, which also compounded their problems with SWAPO, which is another fighting organisation based in Namibia. By 1986, the USSR and Cuba had intensified their involvement into the war. Arguably, the war's zenith was reached during the Battle of Cuito Carnivale, which had become Africa's largest battle since the Second World War, although it must have seemed like a bit of a letdown, as Cuito Carnivale is not much bigger than a large village. The DLC's Operation Modular and Day of the Oliphant feature realistic depictions of the supporting operations during the battle, so you'll be up against plenty of MPLA and Cubans with their Soviet-made equipment. In these DLCs, I enjoyed seeing the Ratel being used in the game, because in real life it was an incredibly interesting vehicle, which proved its worth during the war, and was surprisingly forward-thinking in its design. I also love to see the Oliphant, which is a chieftain tank with South African modifications being used in the game, and I found it very satisfying when I saw them blowing up BTR-60s and T-55s. In some battles I was also able to see fighter planes being used, which was an awesome sight. It really makes a difference on the battlefield. Especially seeing Su-24 fencers rain down rockets and death was just quite an impressive sight, and seeing South African cheaters let loosing their bombs. The developer Graviteam also produced several other games using the same engine, including a game set during the North African campaign during the Second World War. There's also another which has lots of similarities of Mius Front, called Operation Star, as well as some interesting DLC for it, such as Shield the Prophet, which features an imaginary scenario between Iran and the USSR. Certain features of the game which I haven't seen in other titles allow for wrecks and bodies of the day's fighting to actually stay on the field. So for example, day 1 of the campaign, I engage a mechanized infantry battalion in which several vehicles are destroyed and dozens of troops are dead. Day 2, I brought in my Oliphants to defend against some T-55s, and the result of the previous day's fighting is still there. It's a very nice touch which gives you the impression that you are actually fighting a campaign, instead of just a series of maps. I even had one scenario where the enemy completely pulverized a recently captured village with artillery rockets, and the next day it still felt as if it had been recently attacked. Also, each turn accelerates the game by hours, not days, so you can withdraw from battle during the morning, and in the evening force back an enemy attack. There are still some downsides of the game, as the infantry still definitely needs to be worked on. They need more actionable options in game, and their animations make them look far too stiff, which can break immersion at times. It would also be nice if they could adjust indirect fire weapons so that you could actually set them to shoot at a particular range, rather than having them to wait for a line of sight. It would also be nice if in-place weapons could be set to suppress a particular area as well. But the biggest downside for this game is the price. For Mius Front and the full set of DLC, it will cost you £130, which needless to say is something of an arm and leg for most of us, and it's not much better for Operation Star either, which is around £100. Overall, this is a highly enjoyable strategy game, which I feel could have massive potential if it gained enough traction and if the DLC wasn't so expensive. I would also like to see a great amount of diversity of DLC which veers away from Eastern Front, which I feel has been done ad infinitum by other games, such as Company of Heroes 2, Steel Division 2, the Men of War series, and many, many others. I feel that many Cold War conflicts are also just waiting to be developed into games. I mean, it does get a little bit tedious when many games use the Second World War, Vietnam War, or modern warfare. So, with that in mind, I think that's all I have to say about this game, and I hope this review has been entertaining and a little educational as well. If you're interested in this game and want to see more footage, then please comment and let me know. Also, I wish to apologise for my voice as I'm still battling with the flu, or possibly COVID-19. Until then, thank you for watching, and hope to see you next time.